Moses ben Maimon, Maimonides, the Rambam, a man of many names, one of our most revered medieval Sephardic philosophers, a rabbi, a doctor, a revolutionary in his time. He codified Jewish law into the Mishnah Torah. One of his texts that's a little bit less well known is the Guide for the Perplexed. In the Guide for the Perplexed, he talks about Black people, and he talks about his views towards Black people. He talks about what he thinks Black people represent in the world. He says that a Black person is incapable of attaining a level of spiritual rigor than that of other folks. He says that a Black person is akin to an animal, lower than the status of a man, but above that of a monkey. The first time I read this text, I was in a yeshiva in Jerusalem. I sat with this text and I thought to myself, Rambam is my dude. This is my go-to guy. So much of my Jewish education comes from his text. Do I cancel him out? Throw all of that away? Or do I find a way to move through the tension and the conflict that this text created for me? I chose the latter. There is no way for me to cancel out all of my learning based on one text. Jewish tradition teaches us that it's important to be in tension with text and not just accept on face. I would argue that for the Rambam, even though he was from Spain, lived in Morocco, lived in Egypt, lived and died in Egypt, he was surrounded by Black people. But I would argue that he was not in community with any of them. There's no way that he could have been in deep community with the Black people around him and still have those views. Even further than that, I would argue that he wasn't in community with the Jews of color, with the Black Jews around him. They were there. We've always existed. I would even go further to argue that in this moment, as we're in the middle of one of the greatest pandemics in modern history, that as a doctor, I worry how he would have treated Black patients today. I also worry that his views, although they're ancient, if we look at their relativity to time, are still views that some Jews have. Beyond just being Jewish, we're in the middle of a pandemic and we know that COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. What role does implicit bias play in our medical healthcare system? What disservice happens there? I want to take a step from talking about Rambam to talking about what it looks like today. What is this moment that we are in right now? George Floyd, when he died, before he died, when he called out for his mother, he spoke to mothers and emas around the world. They heard his cry, and they were called to action. It is important to recognize that that moment is not just a moment in time. That was a pivotal moment. We cannot go back to the moment before he called out, before he died. Although there are many Black and brown people that have lost their lives at the hands of police and at the hands of racist individuals, we can't go back. This moment is too important. So what does it look like for you to be in community with the Black and brown people in your sphere? I would argue that by not being in community with them, you're likely to repeat, even subconsciously, the same sorts of thoughts as the Rambam. That's a controversial thing to say, but it's true. I ask you, how can you move forward from this moment and be in community with Black and brown people? Even a step further, how can you be in community with the Black Jews in your community? Are they there? Do you see them? Maybe not. That doesn't mean that they're not there. They're just not in your space. When someone says Black Lives Matter and you say, but, that negates anything that comes after it. Point blank period, Black Lives Matter. And then the step above, or the step from that, is think about the fact that Black Jewish lives matter. Because there can be both things in the same vessel. You can be both black and Jewish at the same time. If you chose to go to one of the Black Lives Matter rallies or spoke out about the protests, understand that there isn't a separation between speaking out for black folks and being a part of the Jewish community. The two are intertwined. So I ask you, who are you inviting to your Passover Seder? Who are you inviting to your Shabbos lunch? Who are you talking to in your synagogues? And by that, what I mean is not just inviting someone one time. Are you in deep community? Do you know what their life is like? Do you call them to ask them for some extra yeast because you're making your challah? What does it look like to be in deep community with Jews of color in this moment? What does it look like to cultivate community for other Jews of color in this moment? Because when George Floyd called out for his mother, there was power in that. I'm tasked with speaking to you about power. Speak Torah to power. The question becomes, how can I speak Torah to power? The Torah emanates from God, from Hashem. What power is stronger than that of God, that I'm speaking that to power? What does that say about the power of the individual in this moment? I would argue that they are one and the same and both different. They both exist at the same time. We all have power. In the same way that George Floyd had power to change the narrative of the moment, we have power to move the needle forward towards racial inclusion. So I ask you, how will you move forward from this moment? How will you use your power to change things? Because we have a responsibility as Jews to do tikkun olam, to heal the world. We can't exclude people from that. You can't say the world only belongs to one subset of people. Tikkun olam includes all of us. B'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, is all of us. So, with that, I encourage you. No, I don't encourage you. I'm telling you, be in community with Jews of color. Be in community with black people around you. And if you can't find them, look harder, because we are there and we are no longer going to be erased. Whether you choose to be a part of this moment and move forward with the needle towards equality or not, the needle is still going to move forward. The tide is shifting. You will either be a part of it or left behind. How will you be remembered in this moment? How will you move forward the needle for equality? And how will you be in community with the black and brown people around you and with the Jews of color around you?